Come on. There we go.
All right. This is John Paul, Andrew Klempe, and Ben Thomas with Herb Hoppe here. The date is 5/05/2022, and this is our Milwaukee History Oral Project. Where and when were you born?
I was born at Post Lake, Wisconsin, in Langlade County.
Did you have any memories of Post Lake, Wisconsin?
Yes. I remember my parents would go fishing, but I was just a very young child there. And we moved right after. My dad bought a place in Elko, Wisconsin, and we moved there.
What was the occupation of your dad and mother?
My dad worked for the WPA. He was a timekeeper on a road project there. And my mother was a housewife.
How was your dad's job?
Well, I don't know. He seemed to like it, and it was interesting for him. I remember being there as a very small child, standing on the front seat of the car, looking out the windshield.
Were the shifts long? Because I know during the Depression, people would work constantly to...
I really don't recall. He would often come home, and it was during the Depression, so he would get milk and water from neighbors because we didn't have any water on the property, no electricity.
Did you notice any different effects about the Great Depression in your family?
Oh yes, we were very poor, and we had no battery in the car. I mean, we had a battery, but it was dead. We had to push the car to get it started for him to go to work.
What was probably the biggest challenge during the Depression for your family?
Winters, because we really had, we just had a wood stove to heat, and we had 2 log cabins on the property. Each had 1 room. We slept in one and we ate in the other. There were 5 of us, and I remember the winters. And my dad would light a fire to a rag on the end of a poker and crawl under the car and heat the engine to warm the oil so the engine would turn over and he could start it.
How was the community impacted? Did you see any changes even when you were really young?
Well, it was just that without the other farmers in the area, we wouldn't have had anything to eat. Everything that we tried to grow in the summer, the animals would eat it, the deer and the rabbits and anything that broke ground was gone.
So I know that you moved from Post Lake to the north side of Milwaukee at a fairly young age.
I was 7 years old. We moved in 1942. My dad got a job at a defense plant during the war. He wanted to make enough money to put in a well, because we didn't have water on the place up north.
And so eventually you guys ended up moving to Milwaukee?
We moved to Milwaukee.
Did you notice any severe differences between Post Lake, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee?
Absolutely. It was difficult just to become acclaimed to city life. Other people, neighbors, next door. And none of them liked us, because we were poor and difficult in school.
Were there any things you liked about Milwaukee?
I guess everything. Yeah, it was a change, but it was different, and I got to like it.
And what schools did you go to?
I went to originally 27th Street School. It was on 27th and Brown. And no, it wasn't on 27th and Brown. It was on Brown Street. But then I went to 27th Street School. And then I went to 31st Street School. And Peckham Junior High, and then Boys Tech.
How was the transition between school to school? Was it difficult or was it easy for you?
No, I didn't have a problem. I skipped a grade, or half a grade, like in 6th grade, and I shouldn't have because I wasn't prepared in math, and that was difficult for me that first year, but overcame it, and I became an honor student at Peckham Junior High.
Was the reason for skipping that half grade because of academics?
Yes,
Age?
yes. I just didn't know the material.
Was there any school that you're particularly fond of?
No.
So from Boys Tech, what did you go into?
I went from Boys Tech. I took a course at MATC in auto mechanics. And but while I was at Boys Tech, I was in machine shop. And then I was pretty good at that. And when I was 16 at Boys Tech, Alice Chalmers came there and asked for volunteers to work for them during summer vacation, for training, and then after we were graduated, to go back to work at Alice Chalmers. But I worked the whole summer, never missed a day, hated it. And they put me right on line with all the other, 40, 50-year-old mechanics who really didn't like to have me there because it was a union shop. And I was just scrapping more parts because I didn't really know. They just gave me a blueprint and told me to make something. And I said, I don't know how to do this. But he said, you'll learn, we'll help. So it became very successful. So when I left there at the end of the summer, I was a TA in the machinist department at school then, because I was, other kids would come to me for advice.
Was there any other heavy industrial jobs that you worked besides Alice Chalmers?
Yes, I was a machinist for International Harvester, Harley-Davidson Motor Company, and John Oster Manufacture Company. I was a machinist at all those places.
What was the specific job of being a machinist?
Well, you'd run milling machines and automatic screw machines, and sometimes 3 machines at once.
Did you have a favorite occupation out of all the ones that you listed?
I think a mechanic, auto mechanic.
Did you have a favorite industry that you worked at? Any particular one?
Well, I worked for a Chevrolet dealer downtown, and it was in 1955, and we set up, that was the first year for Chevrolet's V8, and I set up new cars for delivery, getting rid of rattles that we knew were there. And Milwaukee Tallow and Grease leased a number of new trucks from them, and they needed a mechanic to service them. So they moved me from the Chevrolet dealer to Milwaukee Tallow and Grease, and I was the only and head mechanic there, and I worked nights.
For Alice Chalmers, you mentioned how you worked with a lot of older people.
Oh, yes.
You were basically by yourself when it came to being the youngest.
Yes.
How was it working with older people? Like, did you end up making friends with them, or was it kind of just an independent?
No, it was just independence. So they didn't want to be friends, I don't think. And I was too particular about the job. It kept me really busy. You didn't have time or, to really socialize.
Did you have any relationships as a young teenager or adult?
Sure. You mean physical relationship?
Or, boyfriend or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a boyfriend when I was 16. We were both 16.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents got divorced, and my mother remarried. And I didn't get along with any of, when my dad remarried, I didn't get along with any of their wives or husbands. And the family of my 16-year-old asked me if I would move in with them to be with their son, which I did. And they treated me as part of the family.
How was it being gay in the community? Did they make any like judgments, or were they as
Well,
supportive as
this family didn't make any judgments at all. You know, it was open. You know, we slept together. There was no problem. It was a great relationship, and as far as that, you weren't really open. Otherwise, you know, you were secret. You know, it was actually against the law.
From my understanding, you were Lutheran growing up, and your boyfriend was Christian.
Yes, he went to St. Thomas Aquinas, and I do go to church with him at St. Thomas. And then I took an adult class at Lutheran Church and was confirmed there.
Right around then, World War II is happening. Did you enlist, or did your boyfriend enlist?
No, not in World War II, but in Korea. I was too young for World War II. My dad was in the First World War in France.
Was there any motivation or any reason for you to enlist?
I didn't enlist. My boyfriend enlisted, but he was afraid to say that he was gay. I wasn't afraid. I said I was gay and I was 4F, and they didn't take me.
So working at Chevrolet, did that kind of spark your love for cars? Because I know you've had a wide plethora of cars in your lifetime.
Yeah. No, I had a great interest in cars before that, and always collected cars and had 2 or 3 in front of the house all the time, maybe with one set of license plates that I would just move from one to another.
Do you have a particular car that you were especially fond of?
I had a prototype 1930 16-cylinder Cadillac coupe. It was one of 2 built. Very famous car.
Do you know where it is right now?
Yes, it belongs to Carol King. She paid $335,000 for it.
Wow. So moving to Milwaukee, where did you live first?
At 2516 West Walnut Street.
So that was, at that time, it was referred to as Brownsville, correct?
Well, actually, Brownsville was further east. Mm-hmm. It was predominantly white where we lived. Poor white. Never had any trouble with any race relations or anything of any kind.
Did you ever visit Brownsville? Because they're in like an up-and-coming community, and they had many clubs, supermarkets,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just growing.
Right. And, well, at that time, we shopped like on 3rd and which is, you know, Martin Luther King Drive now, and North Avenue was a busy intersection, and that's actually Brownsville today.
What was the ethnicity in the neighborhood that you grew up? Was it Irish or German or Polish?
German, I think, mostly.
Did you get along with the people in that area? Did you have any friends, or did you have any activities that you would partake in?
Yeah, I had friends that I went to school with. Other than that, not any other activities.
So how did your parents react to you telling them that you were gay? Were they upset, or did they have any initial reactions?
No, my stepfather wouldn't accept it. And my stepmother didn't care. My dad was fine with it.
How did you feel the fact that your stepfather didn't accept you for...
He didn't accept me for anything, so, and I didn't accept him either, so. We just never spoke.
Yeah. What was the underground gay scene like in Milwaukee because I know that there's a lot of clubs, and I know there's a huge LGBTQ plus like community in Milwaukee that's very accepting. Was it like that?
Yes, yeah, yeah. There were a lot of bars, and I went to bars. I don't know, not like it is today, because it wasn't really open. You had to be very secretive. You couldn't hold hands, or you couldn't dance, or hug anybody. The police would raid the gay bars.
So you guys were definitely cautious.
Yes,
As you
very.
said how there was a law.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Were there any other moments of conflict besides the police raiding bars and clubs and stuff like that?
No, I didn't. None that I had.
So after your industrial job, you went into antiquing. How did you come up?
No, before that, I was a manager of 2 service stations, and one new one, a DX service station, and the other one was a Beacon oil station on 19th and Hopkins. It's a car wash now. But I managed those, and then I went in the trucking business, and I drove a dump truck, and then hauled heavy equipment, and then later became an operator. I ran, caterpillars and graded lots and whatever, backhoes, whatever. So I got pretty proficient in that. I can run almost any machine that you put me on.
What were the jobs that you were manager in again?
Yeah, service stations, filling stations.
Okay, you said filling stations?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a mechanic.
Do you have any fond stories of construction or hauling those things? Anything that funny happened?
Oh, I don't know. I remember in 1967 there was a huge snowstorm in Chicago and just buried the city. And we went there at the end of January and worked until March. But the city was buried in snow, and it snowed during the day while everyone was at work. And there was no transportation. Nobody could get home. You couldn't drive, and public transportation wasn't running. So all the hotels were filled. My boss called the Mayor Daley of Chicago, senior, and asked him. He said he had some loading equipment and some trucks with plows, and could he use us? He said, the mayor said, yes, come right down. So they put us to work, and we were the first out-of-town company working there, and we were the last ones to leave. They kept us.
Did you enjoy transitioning from job to job? Because it sounds like you definitely did have a bunch of
Oh yeah, and then all different applications, and I liked them all. And it just happened. It just one thing led to another. The breaks were there, and I took them. Everyone always treated me very well. They always put me first, so I never had any trouble with relationships with their employers.
So I'm assuming that you went into the trades instead of college?
Yes, I didn't go to college.
What made that final decision for you between choosing?
Because I didn't live at home and I didn't have any money. There wasn't any, I couldn't possibly have gone, to college. We were very poor.
And then so from operating and managing filling stations, then you went into antiquing? Then
I went into trucking, and then from there I went into antiquing.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get into that scene of antiquing?
When my mother remarried, my stepfather had a moving business and a furniture store. And my mother had a new baby, and I was the babysitter. And I took care of the store. Excuse me. I took care of the store and answered the phone and things like that. So I was around used furniture and stuff like that. I learned a lot in the furniture business and in the moving business. And then I went to work for a rival moving company rather than the one that my stepfather had.
Did you have a favorite between the furniture stores or being a mechanic?
I think after I got into the antiques business, I much preferred that. I had 5 stores. Always had 2 of them running at once.
Was it difficult to run 2 at once, or was it?
It was difficult because you had employees and you had to meet payroll and you had to keep the money coming in.
Were there any workers that had an attitude or anything, or that made your job more difficult, or were they pretty compliant?
Well, I had a partner in the store, although everything was, under my auspices, and he didn't get along with the rest of the employees. But he was only there for a few hours a day. He'd come in like 11 o'clock and leave at 2, so everybody would have to stand down. And but it all worked out all right. It was always interesting.
Did you work throughout the year? You didn't miss any days?
I didn't. I had a few days off when I hurt my back, but I worked 16 years there without a vacation day. I worked 7 days a week.
Did you not take a vacation because you didn't have the means or the time, or you just simply wanted
just couldn't leave the business. I was the buyer, and I kept the books and did all, the major part of the job. And someone had to be there with authority.
Do you think owning a business was stressful on you?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
How did you go into getting these buildings and?
Well, when they were clearing room for the expressways downtown, and they tore down a lot of houses, and we weren't supposed to, but we'd go in and I'd get architectural, effects from the houses, and collected so much stuff that I had to open a store to go somewhere to go with them. A friend of mine had a store, and that's all he ever wanted in his life. He was gay and from a wealthy family, and he always wanted a store, an antique store called the Green Dolphin. And his mother finally gave him the money and he opened the store. And then one day I was driving past and he was sitting on the front stoop, just sitting there looking very depressed, and I stopped and walked across the street and said, "What's the matter, Jerry?" And he said, "Well, I'm really in trouble." He said, "I had a lot of things here on consignment that I sold, and I haven't paid them for it. I'm behind in the rent. I'm behind on the phone, and I don't know what I'm going to do." And I said, "Well, let's go in and take a look and see what you got and look at your books." So went in and looked at everything, looked at his books. He showed me what he owed. And I said, "Just go home." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Turn it off. Pull it. One more." Okay. And so I said, "Just go home." And he said, "No money?" I said, no money." So he left. I paid the bills, took over the store, kept the name, and that was it. That's how I got into the business. Moved all my stuff in, sold his stuff. I paid all his consignment bills, paid all he came out free and clear. Everybody was happy.
So you had 5 stores. Do you remember the locations of them?
Sure.
Or more notably?
Sure. The 2 stores I ran at that time was on Brady Street and Humboldt. And then I had one across from Hooligans on East North Avenue on Farwell and Prospect. I had 2 stores on Old Milwaukee 3rd Street, one on 3rd and Highland and one on 3rd and Juneau. And the one on Juneau, we did brass refinishing and rebuilt beds and all sorts of things. We like stoves. I like old stoves, and I rebuilt, and I had a good employee, which was good at, helping me to rebuild those stores and all that work. That was a lot of fun. And all right.
Oh, sorry. Assuming that you're not working in those businesses anymore, who did you hand those down to, or who did you sell them to?
I just closed the store. I got ill from my diabetes, and when I was 50, and I just had a going out of business sale and sold out, and that was the end of it.
Were there any notable items in the store that sold for a crazy amount of money, or anything that you were particularly fond of?
Oh, I was fond of everything. I don't know if there's any one thing that, that really stood out that I recall.
Did you guys just specialize in all kinds of antiques, or anything specific that you guys specialized in?
All kinds of antiques.
All kinds.
I rebuilt cash registers, old national cash registers, the brass ones. We'd take them all apart and rebuild them and polish all the brass, and they'd be like brand new. And so we did a lot of registers, a lot of brass beds.
So I know that you're particularly fond of Brewer games and Braves. Did you go to any Braves or Brewer games at County Stadium? Or?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Went to Braves, and in fact, I went to a Brewers game at Borchert Field when they were in Double A.
Did you like the Braves more, or were you upset when they finally decided to move them to?
I don't know. It didn't have that much impact on me. I wasn't really that into it, and I'm really not into it now, except that I do watch, Brewers games because they've been sensational this year.
What brought you into the interest of baseball in the first place? Like watching it when you were younger, was it just like the only thing that was available? Or?
My dad used to listen to it on the radio, and it used to drive me nuts because I didn't particularly care for it at all. And I don't know how I ever became interested in it, but I did. I had a friend who's a doctor now, and he used to sell beer while he was going to college. And he got me a season pass as a coach for the ball game, so I used to go to them fairly often.
Did you have a favorite player?
I don't know.
No.
There's a bunch of favorite players, yeah.
Were there any memorable games that you went to? Like playoffs or World Championship or anything like that?
No.
No. So as you were in Milwaukee in the 60s, did you notice a big change in the civil rights movement in Milwaukee with Father Groppe and Val Phillips and?
Yes. Yeah, I remember those. I met Val Phillips and had several talks to her. There was also a black woman called Mary Ellen Shadd who was very prominent in those times, and had many discussions with her.
Did you ever participate in the protests, like the boycotting? Or?
No, I didn't.
Do you remember your conversations with Val Phillips?
No, they were just about neighborhood issues.
Yeah, because I know that she was trying to get an open housing act,
Mm-hmm.
and she got denied in Congress 4
I
times.
know.
Yeah.
She fought so hard.
So you said you didn't participate. Did you voice your opinion about the civil rights movement, or did you voice your opinion in the gay community with trying to make it become legal and get rights?
No, I kept my mouth shut. Although I do remember the riots of 67 or 68, I was when they had the police running armored trucks up and down 3rd Street. I lived in an apartment that was owned by the Pabst people. And I know I was watching him out the window, and the police said, "Get your head out of the window or you're going to get shot." So I did, and then I had a really nice 1941 Cadillac coupe that I had parked behind the house, and I wanted to get it out of the neighborhood because there were all rioting going on, and I didn't want the car to get hurt. So I got in the car and almost made it out of the alley. Somebody threw a brick, put a little dent above the windshield, hardly noticeable, but I got it out of there without any more damage.
Did you ever race your cars or bring them to car shows?
Car shows, yes. I was, in '65, I took the 30 Cadillac 16-cylinder to a car show at the auditorium. And I won second place. But the first place trophy went to Brooke Stevens, because he had a car there that he trailered there that was really clean underneath and really, very nice. It wasn't half the car that mine was, but of course I'd driven mine in and had been driving it on the street, so it wouldn't pass the cleanliness test.
Who is Brooke Stevens?
Brooke Stevens was a car collector. He was a designer. He designed the Wiener Reveal. And he had out on Port Washington Road, he had a museum, a car museum there.
Yeah, could you go into depth on what the Wiener Mobile was?
Oh, the Wiener Reveal was a vehicle that was shaped like a huge wiener on wheels. It was a Oscar Mayer promotion, and I think still goes on today. It's been like for 40 years.
Were there any awards for the car shows, or was it just for pride?
No, I got a trophy. I have it upstairs. And I won. I had a '51 Cadillac Fleetwood that was primarily in just brand new shape, and I had that at a car show in Grays Lake, Illinois, Cadillac show, and it took first place.
How expensive do you think your cars were?
Well, they weren't that expensive to me, but now that 30 Cadillac, I first saw that when I was 15 years old, and I just had a peek at it, looking through the window of a garage at a lake cottage up north on Post Lake. And I always wanted it. I got a hold of the people that owned it, and then he died and the car went somewhere else. So then I tracked it to him, and I kept after him, that I wanted to buy that car. I just had to have it. I would have given my right arm for it. I'm left-handed. But he said, well, someday. He said he had a car collection from 1 cylinder to 16 cylinders, all the way up. And he said if he ever found another 16-cylinder car, he would, consider selling it. So one day he called me. Of course, I was very poor. I would never been able to afford it to begin with. But at the time he called me, he said he found a 16-cylinder Cadillac in Waukesha, and he bought it. And he had it up at Appleton, and if I wanted to come up, I could choose, either one if I wanted to buy either one. So I drove up, and I wanted the coupe. He wanted $2,500 for it. I reached in my pocket and gave him $2,500. And then he gave me $250 back because it needed a valve job. And he said he owned a lumber company in Appleton, and he said, drive it over to the lumber yard and we'll fill it up. He said, and you'll probably have to stop again before you get to Milwaukee, because it gets 4 miles to a gallon.
How did your obsession start with cars?
My dad, when we lived at the place in Elko, he had a 1933 Chrysler, and he was obsessed with that car. He liked it so much. And on the bottom of the grill, there was a little opening that had a crank hole. So if you had to start it with a crank, you put a crank in and start it. Well, there was a chrome cover over that crank hole, and he lost it somewhere on the road. And we spent 3 days looking for that little chrome cover up and down we had a gravel road driveway, about a quarter of a mile long into our place, because we lived in the woods. But we never found it. But he was so upset. I was upset because, that little part meant so much to him. But I always had, an interest in cars. I guess I got it from my dad.
If you had to pick any car today that you would want, what would it be?
1948 Jaguar Mark IV Saloon.
And what specifically about that car do you like?
I don't know, the body style, and it had the big chrome headlights in front.
Are you more into the nostalgic cars or the modern cars today?
Nostalgic, yeah. All the cars that I owned were exceptional in one way or another. I've had like Buick built special models, and I owned them all.
How many cars have you had in your lifetime?
Got to be 100.
Would you store these cars in your garage, or?
I used to rent garages all over Milwaukee to keep cars in. And garages were cheap then, $6 to $10 a month. And then garages got to be $25, $40, $50 a month. And it cost more to store them, So I'd take pictures of them and get rid of the cars. Cheaper to keep the pictures of them. But storage was a problem. I gave one, car to my son, and he loved it. His son loved it, but he found out that to rent a garage was like $60, $70 a month, and it wouldn't take long for the garage costs just to eat up the value of the car, so it didn't pay to keep it.
Did you ever have one of your cars stolen or vandalized?
Yes. I had a couple of cars stolen.
And what were those cars?
One was a '59 Cadillac Fleetwood, and I don't know, they burned the transmission out of it. And the other one was a Plymouth, not much of a car, but I used it for work, and they stole that, and then got in an accident, and then I gave it away.
Did you have any leisure activities or sources of entertainment that you would like to take part of in Milwaukee?
Sheepshead, mostly.
And where would you play Sheepshead?
Like at German Fest, Sheepshead tournaments. And we always played Sheepshead at the stores. I always had free beer on tap for the customers, if you were 21. And we'd play Sheepshead there on Friday nights and Sunday afternoons, and it was open house. Anybody that wanted to play would come, and we'd have a lunch, and that went on for years.
Did you have a favorite beer, like Blatz?
Pabst.
What was it?
Pabst Blue Ribbon. Yep.
What was the reason for that different flavor? Or?
I don't know. It was on. I had it on tap, and it was a good tap beer.
Growing up in Milwaukee, were you introduced to the alcoholic scene at an early age because Milwaukee is known as a brewer city?
Mm-hmm. Well, alcoholics as people?
Just the culture in general.
Oh, well, there was a bar on practically every corner, and Everybody went to them. It was just a normal thing to do.
Do you have a favorite bar?
Yeah, Walski's.
And how long have you been going there?
Since the 60s. I think I'm their oldest customer.
Wow.
Did someone introduce you to the bar, or?
No, I had my first store was in that neighborhood, and after closing, you'd stop and have one before you go home. So, but I stopped there, and it was always nice. And there was another bar that I went to. It was a gay bar, 1000 East North Avenue.
Have you noticed any changes in the bar since you went there?
Well, that's the only bar I go to now because I don't drink anymore, and it's difficult to go to a bar and socialize when you're not drinking and everybody's having half blitzed and having a good time and joking, and you really can't join in because you're, sober.
What was the reason for stopping to drink alcohol?
Just socially. Just social. You meet friends,
Did you have any favorite restaurants or any place that you dined out?
Yeah, Colorash's. And, it was one of my favorite places.
And what did they serve? What kind of restaurant was it?
It's a German restaurant, and they had German fare.
Are they still open today?
Yes. Yes, and they own the Fox and Hounds, I believe.
Was there any specific meal that you enjoyed?
Prime rib.
Where's the location of this place?
It's on Milwaukee and Mason.
Did you ever attend Summerfest?
Oh, yes.
And did you have any notable people that you went to go see in concert?
Yes. Went to see Ella Fitzgerald and enjoyed that performance. I used to go a lot with my son. We'd have a good time, and we'd dance.
Building off of that, I know that you've had a pretty famous dating list. The symphony orchestra conductor from Boston and Milwaukee. How did you get in and start talking to these guys?
I don't know. I always was with my friends. Were all like theater people. Pittman Theater at Alverno. A drinking friend of mine, and his friends, and we would socialize a lot. So I got to know a lot of theater people that are all dead now, but nobody would probably really, recognize their names. There was Harry John Brown. He was the first Milwaukee Symphony conductor, and Robert Hugh Lewis. I lived with both of them on Long Island, in different houses.
How long were these relationships? Were they long-term or were they short-term?
Oh, well, physical relationships were short-term, but friendship was a long time.
And who is Robert Q. Lewis?
He was like on TV shows like What's My Line and Dorothy Kilgallen and those groups.
Were there any luxurious activities that you took part of when you were dating these men?
I was in one production, but I backed out just before it went on stage with Diana Dors. Another one that's gone forever.
What was this production about?
Kismet.
Could you explain?
Well, it's just the production of Kismet. It was just, I had no major part.
Were those relevant people also private about their sexuality, or
They were very private about their sexuality. Absolutely. Word couldn't get out.
And how long was the law against gay marriage intact for?
I don't know specifically, the years that it was. I know that it was just difficult, when like my early 20s when I went to bars, it was difficult to, show any emotion or anything.
You mentioned earlier how there would be police that would raid bars
Yes.
if they saw anything. Was there any point where you were raided?
No. The bars that I went to were fairly well protected.
Do you, so in the late 60s, do you remember the Kennedy assassination?
Yes, very much.
How did that impact you?
Yeah, it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt.
Do you remember where you were when you were
Absolutely. Every minute of it. Yeah, I was living on 3rd Street on, it was Martin Luther King Drive now, in Meineke. And I got up and turned the TV on, and it was there. And the 9/11 attack, I took a friend of mine to the hospital who was having a pacemaker put in that morning. And I was sitting in the waiting room when that came on TV, so I saw it live on TV, the plane hitting the second tower.
What was your first reaction when you saw that occur? Were you in awe? Were you frightened?
I was in awe. I mean, it was a war. I mean, we were being attacked. I mean, we didn't know by who or what the circumstances were, but at first we thought it was just an accident where a plane hit a building, but when the second one hit, we knew there was really something going on.
Speaking of war, do you remember the Red Scare or the Korean War and how it impacted Milwaukee or you?
Well, it was the Korean War that they tried to get me into, which I didn't go. And I don't know how it impacted me. I had so many things going on in my life at the time. I was just trying to keep everything flowing, money.
Did you ever have any moments where you were struggling financially or any scares with financial?
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Yeah. In the stores, always. You had to meet payroll. And you couldn't. When I had the store on Water Street, right at the intersection of East Side, South Side, West Side, North Side, right there, 219, North Water Street. They closed that bridge, and the street was closed for nearly a year, so we had no business and no parking. So those were difficult times.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what the music scene or theater scene was like in Milwaukee?
No, not really.
No. Were there any cool festivals besides Summerfest that you attended? Like parades or Memorial Day or anything like that?
Just gay pride.
Gay pride?
Yeah.
So they did have gay pride festivals back then?
Yeah.
And what were those like?
Oh, they were interesting.
Did you have any opposing protesters on the other end?
Not that I recall. No.
Hmm.
No, it was at the lakefront, and they seemed pretty successful.
Did you ever find a significant other that was a long time?
Yes, my friend and partner who was with me at the store, we were together 54 years. And he died, it would have been 60 years this year, but he died some years ago.
And how did you guys meet?
In a gay bar, I guess is actually where we met. Although I'd met him before that, but there was no interest in anything like that. But and he would come to this gay bar where all my educated friends would go. I wasn't one of them, but they had the greatest jokes and the greatest stories. And he would come in there with someone else, and then one day he just asked me to take him home, and I took him home, and he was drunk. And then the next day he moved in. I mean, I didn't ask him, he just moved in. He brought his books and records, and I couldn't get rid of him. So, but we were together 54 years. And I took care of him. He worked for the sheriff's department. He was a booker at the county jail. But he only worked there a few years after we met, and then I supported him after that.
Did you guys get along together the entire time? Or?
Never got along at all. But we were always together, and he could be very difficult. But if I didn't want to have my house burned down or stabbed in the back, we stayed together.
Do you remember the protester riots or about Brown versus the Board of Education or the desegregation happening in Milwaukee public schools or schools in general?
No.
No?
No.
Did you have any like specific shopping places that you'd go to, like Boston stores or Gimbals or anything like that?
I guess I went to them all, you know. Not one in particular.
Did you go to the beach a lot?
Yes.
Or parks?
Yes.
And which beach did you go to?
Bradford.
Do you notice any differences between Bradford today and back then between like...
I haven't been to Bradford in 20 years. So.
Would you just lay out in the sun at Bradford or swim or...
I'd meet friends, other gay friends. And we just, you know, tear everybody else down.
So moving from house to house, did you notice did you have any hard times with moving into different neighborhoods, or was there a house that you specifically liked or an area that you liked?
I liked the apartment on 3rd and Meineke. It was a building, had 2 stores beneath the 2 apartments. There were 7-room apartments, 3-bedroom, nice apartments. There was a clothing store and a shoe store downstairs, 2 stores. And when Eline owned that, Burberry owned those buildings, and they offered them to me for sale. And I didn't want to buy them. He said, listen, we'll make them so cheap that, you know, you'll have to buy them. He said, we'll sell you the buildings for $6,000. And I said, if you gave them to me, I don't want them, because I couldn't afford to heat them in the first place, you know, and have the stores empty and then have to have, you know, someone rent the stores to pay the taxes on the building. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. And it wasn't, I had a store on 3rd and Highland, kitty corner from Mater's, and I couldn't move my business to those stores in that neighborhood at that time. So I didn't want the buildings.
What was the reason for not being able to move? Expenses or?
Well, I lived in it. I lived in the building, in one of the apartments, but the reason I didn't, because we had no parking there for customers to park there. The neighborhood at that time was mostly black. I just didn't see the opportunity wasn't there.
Do you recall any big specific changes to Milwaukee in the architecture, like the Milwaukee Public Museum or the Art Museum, or?
Well, I just remember Milwaukee tearing down some of the most beautiful buildings that we had.
And what were those?
Well, there was the one on Wisconsin Avenue was not the Pabst, but it was the I can't think of the name of it, and that's strange. Well, anyway, they tore that. People tried to stop the city from tearing it down, and they would set up protests and everything. But the wrecker went there on a Sunday morning and knocked her down. So.
Did you ever go to the art museum or Milwaukee Public Museum or anything like that?
Yes, I have, in the streets of old Milwaukee and the museums, yes. And I had a good friend who was just about ran the Wisconsin Club. And he would take me there and go to garden parties, and it was a magnificent building. That's the Mitchell building.
So when did you move into the house that we are in currently?
I moved here in 40 years ago. I think 79. I moved here in 79. I bought this house. It belonged to a friend of mine, and he was gay, and he lived in New York, and he had a lover in New York, and he died, and he left him all his property in New York and all his money, and then he had an architect come and do this house. He did the whole interior. None of the walls in here touch the ceiling, or not supposed to anyway, but I have things in the attic which and it had it insulated, so they're like touching. But none of the interior walls touch the building itself. They're not fastened, only to the floor, the walls. And it's a unique place. He'd had this place redone for his mother, and then he bought a motorcycle, and he went on a trip around the world. And his mother didn't like it here because she couldn't have any furniture. It's made not to have any furniture. Everything is built in. Everything is built in. This house is only 700 feet. It's got 22 doors in it, and everything is behind the doors. Anyway, she didn't like it. All she had here was a TV, a dining room table that folded out of the wall, and a stool to sit on. She wasn't comfortable here. She really didn't like it. So she rented the place on Lake Drive, a big place, and rented this out. And then people that lived here moved out in the winter and didn't tell her. And all the pipes busted. So the place was flooded. And I heard about it. So I came to look at it. She wanted to sell it. She wanted $28,000 for it. And I looked at it, and she and I and her attorney met, and I offered her $5,000. And she screamed at me and said, "It's got to be nuts. I'd never sell it for $5,000. And the attorney said, take it. What do you want with the place? You're going to have to fix it up. It's going to cost you more than you can get out of it just to put it on the market." And she said, okay. So she sold it to me for $5,000.
Did the housing value go up ever since you purchased?
Actually, it's gone down. My taxes always seems to go down. It went down this last year, $4,800 on the assessed value.
What do you think the reason behind that is?
Because it's on such a small lot and it's such a small house. It's the only house around here. They originally, when they built this place in 1928, this was going to be the garage. And they were going to build the big house in front, just like all the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. But of course, in 1929 was the Depression, and there was no money, so they were never able to build it. So he was a fireman, and he dug out the basement with a bucket and a shovel, and put in a furnace, and then they lived here until they were going to be able to, build a house in front.
You mentioned about the pipes breaking and causing floods.
Mm-hmm.
How much or how much and how long did it take for that to repair?
Not long at all, because I had every part I needed, all Chicago faucets and all the fixtures and everything from the houses that were torn down. I had the stores, and I had everything and replaced everything myself. Didn't cost me anything, just a new water heater.
Is there anything about the community or neighborhood that you live in that you like or dislike?
I like it very much. I love this neighborhood. I love all the neighbors, and they all like me. We all get along fine.
And how long have you been living here?
Almost 40 years.
Is there any changes that you noticed in the neighborhood or school districts?
No,
No?
stays pretty. It's better.
Yeah. It's
It's a neighborhood there of all homeowners. You know, there aren't any rental properties, and it's 90% black, and they're just wonderful people.
Have you always been surrounded in diversity?
Yes,
And you've always perfectly fit in?
absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, moved to the top always. People were always very kind to me.
And why do you think that is?
I have no idea.
So,
Acting.
so as Milwaukee's been deindustrializing, how has that affected you or your jobs in the past?
Deindustrializing? Oh, I don't know. I don't know if it affects me.
Did you notice those changes though when you were in the industry, or were they just booming?
The industries are booming. It was after the Second World War that I was, when I was in. So they were all, strong.
And working for Alice Chalmers, I know that they built bomb shells for the war. Did you have any, did you work on any of those?
No. I worked in the tractor division and made tractor parts.
For agriculture, or did they incorporate those into tanks or heavy artillery in them?
They did all of that. They did all of that. And I was always interested in tractors. My great-grandfather invented four-wheel drive in 1892 in a steam-driven tractor. He had the first patent on it, and I have the patent. I have a copy of the patent, of the original patent. But all the four-wheel drive companies, were all started through him. He was an inventor. He invented many things. They used to make wooden bicycle wheels, and they were like laminated wood, to make the circle. And he invented a machine that would just cut one strip and join it. So he manufactured bicycle wheels for every bicycle company in the United States, because he could make 1,000 while the other people were making 10. He also did the same thing with a screen door factory, that he made Queen Anne style fretwork screen doors. It was in Antigo, Wisconsin, and he bought the factory, and they made they had a lot of employees. They had like 30 employees, and they made 20 screen doors a day. And he took it over, and they made 200 doors a day and laid off half the workers.
Did you guys gain any public recognition for all these?
No, that was so long ago. Nobody ever knew it. My family never knew it. They never looked into it. And they didn't like my father, because my mother was so much younger than he was. So he was sort of an outcast from that side of the family.
Did you take any follow from your... What was the relationship with the inventor again? Sorry.
Yeah, he was my great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather.
So did you take any follow from your great-grandfather? Did you invent anything or make anything?
No.
Did you ever have any hobbies with like woodworking or building stuff, anything like that?
I could do any of that stuff, because I had so much experience, with wood and with, machinery and automobiles, I could do anything. not the best, but I could do it.
Did you have any properties beside this house?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And what was it?
I bought a house for my friend because we couldn't live together because he would break all the glass in the house.
And where is that located?
That's on Richards and Wright.
So you lived with him in that house, or you lived here and he lived in there?
Yeah, we lived in separate houses. We got along fine.
When did you get him that house? What year?
I think 1975.
Okay. And before that, did you ever face issues with redlining regarding your community?
No, I didn't personally, no.
Did you have any experience from other people that faced issues with redlining or blockbusting or anything like that?
Not to my knowledge, no. Not that I recall.
So during the era of cryptosporidium, did you take any measures to avoid contracting the disease?
Yes, I put in a water filtration system here in the house, and which I still use. I don't drink water in restaurants. Not that I'm afraid of the water, but usually it's the ice machines that are corrupt.
What is corrupt about the ice machines?
They don't really clean them. So you could get, Legionnaire's disease and everything, if you're not. And I have pretty delicate health, so I have to be careful.
Did you ever have Legionnaire's disease?
No, but my friend did. And he was in the hospital for 9 weeks. He was, out of the 7 people that had it that year, 4 were in Canada and 3 were in the United States, and they all died, except my friend.
Well, moving on from that, did you ever, did you ever have any magazines that you regularly read or newspapers?
No, I don't think so. I used to subscribe to like Old Car Magazine, but I stopped that.
What about the Journal Sentinel?
I used to get that years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't get it here. Well, because of the paper would just lie out. The people would know you weren't home, if the paper was lying there. So I just never got it anymore.
Do you have a favorite building in Milwaukee out of all the buildings that there are? Or
This one.
this one? Do you like any of the new buildings that they put up, like the Northwestern Mutual Building or the Fiserv Forum, or you don't care for them, or
Yeah,
indifferent?
yeah, I like them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like them.
Do you like where the city is headed?
It seems to be, yes. Yeah, we've had a good mayor, I believe.
Do you have hope for it?
Yes.
So like a couple years ago, COVID-19 hit us, and it was very effective towards everyone. Personally, what was the impact that it had on you?
Well, I wore a mask and I got all my shots. I've had 4 shots. So I've, just pretty much stayed home during the crisis of it.
Did you keep in contact with JP and all
Sure,
the other family?
Sure.
Coming out of COVID, is there anything that you're especially thankful for? Anything that you took for granted before that you don't anymore?
I was upset that because of politics, people wouldn't take the shots. That disturbed me.
Have you ever had any negative encounters in this area with neighbors or anything, or people bothering you?
No.
Because I know that
Yeah.
We're reading right now in class that 16th Street and Rufus King neighborhood in general is more dangerous and crime prone. Have you noticed that?
Now, what streets did you say?
16th Street.
16th?
16th, yeah.
16th Street.
Mhm.
No, not here.
No?
No.
Um,
I mean, if you're talking like further south, like Capitol Drive, and from there east or from there west, there are problems, but not in this neighborhood.
okay.
This neighborhood is sort of a setback away from everything else around the city. Probably because they're all single-family homes and they're all owner-occupied and they all take care of their houses and they watch their neighbors, and we watch them.
So you said how you saw, was it Vel Phillips that you talked to? Did you ever encounter Father Grappi?
No, although I remember him really well, from the times. And when they tore down his church, I bought all the fixtures when I had the stores, and I bought all the fixtures and when they tore down the church.
Were there any other important Milwaukee historical figures that you encountered?
Gee, a lot. I don't know. No one that really stands out comes to mind.
I know that you met Judy Garland. What was that experience like?
That was very nice. She was performing in Chicago, and I went down with some friends of mine, and a friend of mine worked for the classical radio station here, and he got us backstage, to meet her.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you didn't take vacations a lot while you were working. Were there vacations that you took after or before?
Oh, yes.
And where did you go?
I went all over the United States. I took went East Coast and Arizona and, California, up through the mountains to Washington.
Did you?
So all over.
If you could move to any state, would it still be Wisconsin?
It would be Wisconsin, and I would be in this house. I'm going to die here. I love this house.
Do you like the weather?
Yeah, I do, and I look forward to the snow, although I'm not as efficient at shoveling it anymore. My grandson helps.
Was there any moments during winter where the traffic was very rough or the snow was so bad where businesses would get called off?
Yeah, I guess it was the winter of '99. I was driving a snowplow then, off the books, but and I worked for 3 days, and I wound up in the hospital with the variant of leukemia, and I had to go on a series of shots for 6 months, and then they extended it another 3 months, but I was cured, so I got over it.
It sounds like you've had your fair share of diseases and chronic illnesses. Was there any disease that specifically hit you extra hard or anything that worried you about taking your life?
Or did I think about taking my life?
No, that you thought might kill you or might...
Every one of them might have killed me. I've been in the hospital. I've had a heart attack. I was up north and it was putting a TV antenna on a 80-foot tower, and I was about 3/4 of the way up and had a heart attack. And I was there alone, and I couldn't get down. I couldn't let go of because I was just froze to the tower, and I couldn't move. And finally, I was able, to get my hands free and climb down. And I knew I had a heart attack, and I knew I'd probably get another one. But I went in the house, and I had some nitroglycerin pills, and I took one. And the symptoms went away. And about 3 hours later, I started getting a heart attack again. So I took another nitro pill, and I got in my car and drove back to Milwaukee. It was a 2-hour drive, but I drove to Freighter and walked in and said, I'm having a heart attack. So they rushed me right in, and they operated that day, open heart surgery and a triple bypass. So I'm fine.
Was there any other moments that you were scared of death or anything else that really hit you?
Oh, I don't know. Just I got progressively sick after I had the stores, and my body started eating me, and I was just losing weight, like 2 pounds. Yeah, 2 pounds a week for, I don't know how long. I lost like over 100 pounds. I mean, I just kept eating and eating, and it wouldn't do any good. I couldn't stop from losing the weight. Then I went to therapy for like a year, and to try to build back my muscles and my legs, and because I couldn't walk, I was in a wheelchair. But then it all came back, so I'm fine again.
You said you were up north. Where were you specifically?
At my brother's cottage.
And growing up, were you guys close?
Not real close, because we never lived close to each other.
Mm-hmm. And where is your brother's cottage?
It's near Amherst, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. And how long did he have that cabin?
He had it in the very early 70s, and he had it until he died, and he left it to me.
I have a question, because we were talking about illnesses earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Today, mental health is viewed as very important, and a lot of people are more open about it than in the past. How was it in the past with people with mental health? How would they cope with it?
I don't know how they coped with it. Not easily. I noticed some friends of mine who were off their nut, so to speak, but nothing that they would admit to, or nothing you would accuse them of. It was what it was. A very good friend of mine in the last few years committed suicide. Really heartbreaking for me.
Do you have any advice to anyone who is struggling with mental illness?
Get help.
Yeah.
Get help. Don't be afraid to talk about it.
Do you have any advice to the youth of Milwaukee or Wisconsin? Coming from living there?
I don't know. I think just be reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Respect for other people. And have some fun.
Well, thank you for letting us interview, and I'm very happy that we got to hear your words.
Well, thank you for coming.